So Dune Part 2 is here, and a few weeks ago I watched Part 1 in the cinema with an early look at Part 2. Today, before Damsel comes out on Friday, I thought it would be a good idea to review both Dune films and see if they come together to make one epic 5.5 hour film. You ready? Good, let's begin with Part 1. Dune Part 1 is really long. To say that it's boring would be a lie to me, because it's not really. It is just extremely long, and sometimes that's okay. The film focuses more on building up a world of Arrakis, subsequently doing the heavy lifting for Part 2, and Part 2 looks to be the more story-focused part, and yes, looks to be because I'm writing this before Part 2 comes out. But that's not to say Part 1 doesn't have a story, because of course it does. Otherwise the film would just feel like sequences thrown together without properly following one another. And while it can feel like a setup, because it mostly is, it's still good. I mean, the Fremen and Spice story is still like the basic government versus oppressed native story, but somehow it still feels fresh, and because the characters involved in it are interesting to watch. Leto Atreides, who is played fantastically by Oscar Isaac, wants to get the spice harvesting back on track as ordered by the Emperor, but doesn't want to kill the Fremen and will let them have the deserts and their homes, as long as they can get the spice when they need to, since it's the only way to achieve intergalactic travel. But as we learn, turns out the Emperor sided with the Baron to eradicate House Atreides, and that's why he ordered them there. It would be easier to kill them off their home world. And so now Paul, played by Timothée Chalamet, and his mother, played by the wonderful Rebecca Ferguson, are all that's left of House Atreides. And because his mother is like part of some cult, they both have this Jedi mind trick type ability, where they can make people do what they want. All the different groups and factions are really interesting to watch and learn about throughout the film. However, I'm not a huge fan of Timothée Chalamet in this film. I mean, of course he's good, but I think he was finding his footing in this role in Part 1. But based off the trailers for Part 2, he looks to have found his footing completely, not just in the role but as an actor as well. But we'll cover more of him in Part 2. The film looks extremely good, considering that most of it is in a desert, but even deserts have their beauty. The effects are phenomenal, and the scale of this film and this futuristic world is genuinely so well done. The sound design is actually really good, and you feel engrossed in it. Oh, and Hans Zimmer's score is ethereal. It fits the film perfectly, and I'm glad he was busy with Part 2 to score Oppenheimer, because Dune's score is great and Ludwig Göransson scored Oppenheimer perfectly, so I guess you could say it all works out in the end. Back to Dune Part 1 is really good, while mostly a setup and being really long. 8 out of 10, on to Part 2. This film does everything Part 1 did right, but steps it up a notch in my opinion. It's a worthy successor that still needs the Messiah chapter to close out the trilogy, but just about everything here is phenomenal. From the cinematography to the camera work to the performances, it's all amazing. I don't want to spoil too much, and I don't want to do what everyone on Twitter seems to be doing, which is overhyping it just a lot, saying it's one of the greatest films ever made. If you have not watched it yet, try to take opinions loosely, including mine, for this film, and just go watch it for yourself and enjoy it, because if there's one thing I can say about it, that it is a cinematic experience, and it is something that demands the big screen. Whether you end up enjoying it, that is down to how you feel about the film. Everyone delivers on the performances, but I do want to mention a couple of standouts. First being Austin Butler, the newcomer in this film, who is unrecognisable. His performance is fantastic, and I promised I would talk about Timothée Chalamet again, and he does kinda own it this time around. He is still not my favourite actor ever. He's still got a long way to go, but you can see his growth across these two films, which is good. If performances are something you're worried about, don't be, because everyone is great, from Zendaya to Josh Brolin to Rebecca Ferguson. But that is all I really want to say about it. It's good, it's long, but it's worth the watch in my opinion, especially if you're a fan of the first part. If you're not, then you might get some enjoyment out of it, but if you did enjoy the first part, I'm sure you'll enjoy Part 2, because it's everything that film was and more. But try not to raise your expectations from what you hear online. However, that being said, 9 out of 10. And so the first two parts of Dune level out to an 8.5 out of 10. Whether Part 3 will be called that or it will be called Dune Messiah, I don't know, because I have no idea how the books are, though these films do make me want to read them. As he also proved in Wonka, Chalamet can be a great leading actor. And now next up is Damsel, and I'll see you all next week for that. Peace out.